I have the great joy and pleasure this evening to have Paige Parks join me. Paige is the executive director of Rhode Island Kids Count. And those of us who have been around a while in Rhode Island remember Kids Count as being the province of Elizabeth Burke Bryant, who for many, many years led it so successfully. And Paige has stepped up to that challenge and done a terrific job. But Paige, rather than me talking about Kids Count, you run Kids Count. Why don't you tell us about Kids Count?
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Senator, for having me on. It's nice to share space with you and to have discussion. So Rhode Island Kids Count is a statewide children's policy and advocacy organization. We are dedicated to improving the health, safety, education, economic well-being, and development of Rhode Island's children. We have a core focus on equity, and that is something we are not running away from. And we are dedicated to improving and improving the lives of children by eliminating disparities and disparities that we see by race, ethnicity, disability, income status, neighborhood, zip code. We do this work through lots of different ways. We're primarily known for the Rhode Island Kids Count Fact Book, which is the state's most comprehensive data set on children. It's an annual publication that folks can download for free on our website at rikidscount.org. It tracks indicators of child well-being with 67 indicators. So if you want to know what's happening with kids in Rhode Island, you go to the fact book. So we've been producing that for 31 years. But data is important, but it doesn't do it all. We need advocacy. We can't just stare at the data and the numbers. We need to make improvements. So Rhode Island Kids Count also does a tremendous amount of advocacy for kids so we can see the numbers improve for all children in Rhode Island, particularly our most vulnerable kids. And we hold the state accountable. We've been around for a long time. So we know when legislation has changed, why it has changed, and we want to make sure that kids stay in the forefront of all decisions that are made. And we also amplify youth voice. So we create opportunities for young people to give us their ideas, their solutions, so that we're able to craft policies that are actually reflective of the communities they serve. So it's an honor to be the executive director. You have a strong team, amazing, incredible, dedicated folks, dedicated to children, and to Rhode Island.
I should add that Paige has significant Rhode Island cred as well before she got lured away to earn her master's degree up at Harvard, I think it's called.
Yeah, that little school.
Yeah, she was a PC graduate.
That's right.
Full on fire. So that's pretty terrific. So we're going to be talking about how children are doing in Rhode Island and what I call the big, beautiful for billionaires bill that the Republicans shoved through with a big partisan vote will do for them. And I'll start by talking about two programs, SNAP and CHIP. Let's start with SNAP. To people who don't know about these acronyms and the programs that you and I live with day in and day out, what does SNAP do? How does it help kids in Rhode Island? How many Rhode Islanders depend on it?
Sure. So SNAP stands for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It's an anti-hunger program. So we all know hunger is bad, and hunger in childhood is extremely bad. So children who experience hunger or have lack of access to sufficient foods experience serious physical, psychological, emotional, and academic problems, and it interferes with their growth and development. So SNAP is a program that was created to help families purchase food when they either have limited income, they're facing unemployment or reduced work hours, or they are experiencing a crisis, because it's important to make sure that children have food. So child hunger has been known to be decreased by 1/3 after families have received SNAP benefits for 6 months. We also know that children who participate in SNAP in early childhood have long-term improvements. We see short and long-term health outcomes, improved high school graduation rates, and increased earnings when these young children become adults. So addressing hunger is extremely important. In Rhode Island, 70% of all SNAP holds who participate, they're low income families. So when we talk about the federal poverty level, I think it's really important to know like what that dollar amount is that we're talking about. So for a family of three, that's one parent, two children, so the federal poverty level is $25,820 in 2024. So this is extremely low income. In Rhode Island, it costs about pre-tax income $99,000 to live in this state without needing any kind of additional supports or help. So imagine what a family of three at $25,000, what the kind of choices they're making as a family. So 70% of all those SNAP households are earning about 25,800 bucks. So not a lot of money to pay rent and feed your children. Also in Rhode Island in October of 2024, that meant that it was 44,951 of our kids under the age of 18 were receiving SNAP benefits. So this is a lot of kids we're talking about. These are kids living in extreme and horrible economic conditions, and we need to make sure they are fed, and SNAP is the program that helps families do that. SNAP also helps kids get meals at school. So when a child is eligible for SNAP, they also are automatically enrolled in the school meal program. So it's a really important anti-hunger program that Rhode Island definitely needs for our kids.
Here is what the Big Beautiful for Billionaires bill did for SNAP in Rhode Island. It imposed what they call work requirements on families, which is actually not really a work requirement. It's actually a work reporting requirement.
Yes.
That requires tons of paperwork whose purpose is to drive people off the program by adding enormous amounts of red tape and bureaucracy and filling out of forms. And we've actually had that experience in states that have gone this way before.
Yep.
As a result of that sort of tormenting these very low income families with more paperwork burdens and more reporting burdens, as many as 10,000 Rhode Island kids could lose their SNAP benefits. And on top of that, it moves to the state over $50 million in cost share that has to come out of Speaker Shekarchi and the General Assembly and their budget that they had not planned on, plus another $12 million in administrative cost to run all this new bureaucracy of trying to discourage people from being on SNAP by making them fill out more paperwork. 10,000
Yeah.
kids, Paige, how does that play out in lives in Rhode Island?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that it's work reporting requirements because most people that are on SNAP are working. This is creating, like you said, so many administrative burdens, making it hard for families to be able to report what they're already doing. So we're really concerned for both SNAP and for Medicaid, which I know we'll talk about in a little bit, is that folks who are eligible for the program, people who are already working, may lose that benefit just because of the difficulty to report it. And that's just horrific because families need help. They're doing what they're supposed to do, and it's just creating barriers. And the research has shown that increasing this work reporting requirements doesn't actually make people work more. It just kicks people off that really deserve it and need it and rely on it. And our kids are everyone's responsibility. They are our future. They are 100% of our future. So it's extremely important that our kids do not go hungry, especially in these early years, or else we are going to have children and a society that has long-term trauma and impact that we won't be able to handle. And kids need to eat. All kids need to eat.
Yeah. And the other program, I said we'd talk about SNAP and about CHIP. Why don't you walk our listeners through CHIP and what it means for kids in Rhode Island?
Sure. So CHIP and Medicaid in Rhode Island is a combined program, and that provides insurance coverage for low income, for income eligible people, and particularly for children. And this is extremely important, much like hunger. Of course, our health is extremely important. Having health insurance coverage for children really helps to ensure that they are healthier. Children who have health insurance have fewer preventable hospitalizations than those who are uninsured. And the children who are insured through Medicaid and CHIP are more likely to receive primary and preventative medical care and dental care. They also have access to specialists and they have fewer unmet health needs than our uninsured kids. And CHIP in particular has been really effective in reducing racial and ethnic disparities so that more children have access and are able to utilize different health services. And on the long term, what that means, it shows there was improved educational outcomes. And it also helps to shield our children from poverty. And we know experiencing poverty for a long period of time creates multiple negative outcomes and traumatic experiences for children. So in Rhode Island in particular, that our youngest Rhode Islanders are the most dependent on Medicaid and CHIP. 52% of all of our children under the age of 3 in Rhode Island are enrolled in Right Care, which is Rhode Island's Medicaid and CHIP program in 2024. And almost 3/4 of all of the folks who are on Right Care, they're under the age of 19. So what that means, it's just under 118,000 children under the age of 19 are enrolled in Right Care in Rhode Island. And if we look at our babies, 44% of all the babies born in Rhode Island in 2024, they were born through the assistance of Right Care and the Medicaid insurance. So this is extremely important for us in Rhode Island because we have great access to our Right Care program. Rhode Island, we're ranked 10th best in the country for having our most children insured, having health insurance covered. Only 3.3 of our kids are uninsured at this point. We're trying to reduce that, of course. But this is extremely important. Medicaid and CHIP, it works. It works for kids. It helps keep them healthy and helps them be able to do well in school and into adulthood.
And CHIP is the acronym for Children's Health Insurance Program. So that's pretty self-explanatory, like SNAP is Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program.
Yes.
And what we're seeing is that Medicaid and CHIP Right Care covers about 37% of Rhode Island children, and that 45,000 Rhode Islanders could lose Medicaid coverage from this big, beautiful, only for billionaires bill that was shoved through, and that mostly those people who will be losing their Medicaid coverage, those families that will be losing it, the kids that will be losing it for the same reason as SNAP, that the Republicans put a lot of new red tape and bureaucracy and reporting requirements to make more traps for families to miss a report. Every 6 months, you have to report now. And if you miss one, then you're out and they make it much harder to get back on. So it's really a tricky way to get families who legally qualify for SNAP, for Medicaid, for CHIP, who legally qualify, to get them off the program by making the bureaucracy so difficult that you fail to file your forms on time, which seems to me to be about the worst possible way to try to diminish the size of a federal program.
Right. And when we talk about the work reporting requirements, I think a piece that's important for people to think about or to remember is that for many of our low income families who are working, again, majority and most of them are working, but they may be working many jobs. They may be working in a job where their hours change and shift.
Yep.
So they're maybe working many hours this week and then they have less hours the next week, or they're working multiple jobs. Maybe they're driving Uber or Lyft and having to keep track of all of those different income sources and piecing it together. And if you miss one, what does that mean in terms of your reporting? It's extremely burdensome. And these families are not only working multiple jobs, they're also caring for their children.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
now
and
we're
by
going
the
to add
way,
in, and send me all your receipts, send me all your pay stubs from all your multiple jobs that you've been trying to. It's overburdensome. It's also just extremely discouraging for families. We should be decreasing barriers so that families are able to work and to support their children, and not creating more administrative burdens to make it hard for them to do what we need families and parents to be able to do.
yeah. And by the way, this money does not go into the pockets of the children and the families. It goes to the healthcare providers. It goes to our health centers. It goes to our hospitals. It goes to our nursing homes. And the predicted hit in revenue to Rhode Island
Yes.
in the next decade is $5 billion. So we just had a conversation with Mike Wagner, who's the president of Care New England, about trying to save the birthing center at Newport Hospital, which he announced today that they will in fact be saving. So that's good news. But the reason we had to have that conversation is because Michael Wagner and John Fernandez, sorry, it was John Fernandez, not Michael Wagner, the two CEOs of Care New England and of Brown Health, are looking forward at future revenues that have dropped by billions of dollars. And so they're having to desperately try to figure out what they can cut now so that they can protect their institutions from these cuts. Because at the end of the day, you can still go to the emergency room. It's not good. It's not efficient. It's not the best care. It's usually too late. It doesn't provide preventive services. It doesn't provide primary care. There are a lot of reasons you don't want to go there, but ultimately you can. It's just the worst place to be the entry point for healthcare. And all of those costs still happen to the hospitals, just no revenue to support it. So we're looking at real difficulties for the service providers ahead, aren't we?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So there's the impact that we're concerned about directly on the children and families, but it's important for everyone to know that we are all interconnected. So I'm a person, if I see a child, this is why I work at Kids Count. I see a child, I'm like, well, that's my baby too, right? Like some of us can see kids and when we know how we are all connected to our neighbors. Some of us don't have that, and that's okay. But it's important to remember, even though the child next door to you may not be in the same economic situation as you may not connect or relate to them and their family and their experiences, but we are interconnected as a community. So if the family across the street loses their access to food, loses their access to medical care, and the providers, as you're saying, who provide that service to them also means our community is going to have less access to those providers who serve those families. There's a whole infrastructure built on interdependent folks who are paying Medicaid, folks who are private payers, all together build the system. So if we're losing those federal funds for Medicaid, it's going to impact even the private payers. And also, as you mentioned, the stress and the strain on the state, for the first time, Rhode Island is going to have to pay, I think it's 15% of the SNAP benefits. We haven't had to do that before. This is going to create strain on the state. And the state is going to have to make terrible decisions about where this money is coming from. Because we're not producing money, right? We hear Speaker Sakarchi say that all the time. I don't have the mint in the back of the state house. So where's that money coming from? Where are those cuts coming from? It's going to impact every single person. And that's why state advocacy is so important now. Organizations like Kids Count, Economic Progress Institute, Latino Policy Institute, all the state advocates. Right now, our job is to make sure that we are at that state house and we are working with policymakers to ensure that kids and families, our low-income families, stay at the forefront of decision making. We are also extremely proud to be a part of a national network. So I know there might be folks that are coming in through YouTube that are at other parts of the country. Please find who your state advocacy organizations are. I'm the chair of the Partnership for America's Children, which is a national network of local and state advocacy organizations, just like Kids Count. And we are all working double time to both directly work with our federal partners and also with our state agencies to do the important advocacy to make sure our kids and our most vulnerable families are at the forefront. So find your local advocacy organization, get involved. Advocacy works. We need to make sure that kids are not forgotten when these really tough decisions have to be made.
I would add also make sure that those advocacy organizations like Paige's are in touch with their fellow advocacy organizations in red states, in states with Republican senators, because I think what the governors and speakers and Senate presidents in those states are going to find is that Congress didn't tell them the truth about how bad this was going to be for their budgets, for their state, for those hard choices everywhere. And the more that there's pushback on the Republican senators who jammed this thing through from their home states, from their constituents, the more likely we are and the quicker we will get this thing turned around. Paige Parks, thank you so much for what you are doing. Thank you to all of the Kids Count team. You're terrific to be on board. And thanks for joining this conversation.
Thank you so much, Senator. And thank you for your hard work. You are such a strong champion for kids and for Rhode Island, and we really appreciate your work. Thank you.
You're nice. Well, I've got people that have sent in questions, and Megan is here to help me go through them and hand them off. The first one comes from Faith from Providence. What, if anything, is being done to counteract the extremely negative effects of doggies? They call it Doge, I call it doggy, destruction of USAID. Let me start by saying that I grew up in the Foreign Service. My dad was a Foreign Service officer. My grandfather was a Foreign Service officer. We've been in that diplomatic work my entire childhood, as long as I remember. And USAID was an extremely important part of our footprint. It was the part that delivered food. It was the part that helped build bridges. It was the part that responded when there was a flood. It was the part that showed America cared and was there for people when they were in trouble. In fact, the USAID logo was two hands holding each other, the hand of America's generosity reaching out to people who were suffering in impoverished and difficult places in the world. And they did a really good job and built huge credit for America all around the world that is valuable to us from a national security point of view and an economic point of view. What the doggy boys did to USAID was to destroy it. They fired everybody. They shut down the budget. They gave up the office. They tore the name off the building. And so they violated a lot of laws by doing so, but the remedy would be to make them put it back, and there's nothing to put back. The employees are gone. They found other jobs. There's just, the systems are shot. Everything is gone. So what we're trying to do is to take the various functions that USAID used to do and try to get them rebuilt within the State Department. So it's not an adjunct to the State Department, it's in the State Department. I worked on a lot of ocean plastic waste legislation, and much of the work that we authorized with that legislation was being done through USAID. So I've been working with my Republican helper on that. The two of us led both of the ocean plastic bills. And so we're working to try to get that work re-engaged over at the State Department. But the State Department is having its own troubles. The doggy boys are in there wrecking the place. And the Secretary, Marco Rubio, has not been very helpful about trying to effectuate the transfer, or more likely now, because of the destruction, the rebuild of those functions into the State Department. So really the best that we can do right now is to put a lot of pressure on the State Department to re-up those functions and to make sure that when we do appropriations bills, that money that used to go to USAID for those specific programs is now given to the State Department. And so they're obliged to now do the work that USAID was doing. Probably the dumbest way in the world to restructure USAID so that it's within the State Department. It would have been much easier to say, we'll pass a law and make it a component of the State Department. Wouldn't have been interrupted. But there's something about the doggy boys that revels in the destruction of government agencies. And here's one that they got away with. From a TikTok question, can anything be done to stop Emil Bovy once he's confirmed? Why hasn't he been disbarred? So everybody knows what we're talking about. Emil Bovy was kind of the junior lawyer on the legal team that defended President Trump, then Donald Trump, in his criminal cases, the ones where he was convicted that made him, officially a criminal. And his reward for that was first to be stuffed into senior positions at the Department of Justice, along with co-counsel who had also represented Trump, so that his personal lawyers were now running the Department of Justice. Just hold that thought for a moment. And then they've teed him up to be put onto the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, the second highest level of court below the Supreme Court. And we're going to be voting on him tonight. So, and I've been objecting to this guy as hard as I can. He was at the Department of Justice for 6 months, and he was involved in 3 separate serious instances of prosecutorial misconduct. Not little technical violations, but really horrifying abuse of the power of a prosecutor. I won't list all 3 of them now, but in addition to them, he also was involved in some fashion, presumably, in dealing with the Jeffrey Epstein files. And he wouldn't answer any questions for us about that. In one of those instances of prosecutorial misconduct, a judge was so irate that he started a contempt investigation, a hearing, to look into the misconduct out of the Trump Department of Justice, specifically around this individual. And 2 Trump judges on the circuit court put a hold on that, what they call an administrative stay, which is usually kind of an emergency measure that lasts maybe a day or 2. Not too long ago, a Supreme Court justice chided another circuit court for letting an administrative stay last for 2 weeks. This one, that 2 Trump judges did over the objection of a 3rd judge, has lasted for 3 months, during which time they shoved Emil Bovy with a very obedient Republican Senate Judiciary Committee through our process without answering questions and headed him for the court. So it looks like a real political play was run with 2 Trump judges basically doing the blocking while they ran the play without us able to get access to the real testimony under oath, subject to cross-examination with exhibits and discovery and all of that, that would have transpired if the judge had been allowed to go ahead with his hearing. So he has not yet been disbarred, but he is the subject of ethics complaint, in fact, one that I brought, and that was reassigned to the Department of Justice Office of Professional Responsibility, which presumably has done nothing. We haven't heard a word out of them. And then now it'll go back to the New York Bar Association because he'll be out of the Department of Justice and no longer subject to the Office of Professional Responsibility there. So we'll see where this all ends. But this is a guy, it's a world record to be involved in 3 significant instances of prosecutorial misconduct in 6 months. That's just his nature. He'll keep it up on the bench. We are not done with hearing about the bad behavior of Emil Bovy. And I'm not going away. It took 6 years to get to the bottom of how they finagled the Kavanaugh supplemental investigation, but I did. After everybody else had given up, I kept plugging, and we finally got the story out. So I'm pretty diligent, and I'm not going away on this guy Bovy either. Willa, from Providence. Are there any updates you can provide on changes to Medicare since Republicans passed the Beautiful for Billionaires bill? Not yet. Medicare gets implemented through the hospitals and the nursing homes and the federal health centers and the medical practices in Rhode Island. So when that whole system gets starved for revenue by the Medicaid cuts, then everybody's going to suffer, and it's going to debilitate the system that also provides Medicare. It's going to be particularly hard on nursing homes, by the way, where Medicaid and Medicare so often converge. So there's potential fairly immediate damage to the healthcare system in Rhode Island. But the other trick is this. When you pass a bill that adds as much to the debt as this bill does, we can argue about exactly how much it adds to the debt, but here's what the Republicans did. They lifted the debt limit by $5 trillion. So that's the order of increase in the debt that they were looking at, that they needed to lift the debt limit that much for this bill. When you add to the debt of the United States by that much, it kicks in another law called sequestration. And that creates mandatory cuts across the board to a whole variety of federal programs, essentially all of them, but Social Security and Medicare is subject to those cuts. So unless something is done, Medicare will be cut by these Republicans who, like Pontius Pilate, washed their hands after the bill passed. No, we didn't do anything to Medicare. Oh, yes, there's no protection from that sequestration cut in their bill. They could have put it in, they chose not to, but we're going to keep calling them out on it because they've all promised, oh no, we wouldn't possibly cut Medicare. What they didn't tell you is, oh no, we won't possibly cut Medicare in a way that you would notice. So now we're going to make sure that people notice this and fight back against the sequestration cuts. So those are the two ways Medicare gets hurt by the Beautiful for Billionaires bill. Instagram. How can Trump be stopped from spending taxpayer dollars on his own selfish expenditures? I assume you mean like a new fancy Air Force One from the nation of Qatar that we're going to have to spend tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to reconfigure for Trump and make it safe as Air Force One. Or perhaps, and which becomes the property of the Trump Presidential Library at the end of his term of office. Thank you, Qatar. And you may also be thinking about like flying on Air Force One over to Scotland at taxpayer expense to use his office of the president to get lots of free publicity for his new privately owned golf course so that people come to it and put money in his pocket. I'll tell you, it took a lot of nerve to be a Trump and talk about the Biden crime family. These guys have taken cashing in on being president to a whole new level. Probably the worst is the crypto stablecoin stuff. It's a little bit complicated to get into right now, right here, but Google Trump crypto billions and you'll find some pretty horrifying stuff. So what else have we got? We've got Deborah came in on YouTube, and I guess this is the last question before I've got to go over before they close the vote. Again, it's that same character Bovee that you asked about that we're voting on right now. People say Republicans are afraid to vote against Trump's agenda. What exactly is the fear? The fear is a lot of things. The fear is first the calls that they will get from Trump's political operatives who behave like a bunch of thugs. They operate by making rough political threats. And they have no desire to play nice or to show respect for Republicans in the Senate and they are eager to punish any Republicans who stray from the Trump agenda. So there's that. Then there are the Republican creepy billionaires who can threaten to throw enormous amounts of money against Republicans in primaries if they cross Trump. So Musk made that promise before he and Trump had that falling out. Now you've got these crypto billionaires and fossil fuel billionaires who can make those same threats. The fossil fuel billionaires have been doing this for a long time. They knocked out a congressman named Bob Inglis because as a Republican, he insisted on continuing to talk about climate change, and they couldn't have that. So they drove him out with huge expenditures in his primary, and everybody else noticed when that happened. So that financial threat is very real. And the third part of the threat is perhaps the most grotesque of all, and that is the far right-wing extremists on the internet who, when they're provoked, when they're prompted, will attack people across the internet, and they will attack them using other communications, including, phone calls and things like that. And when I say attack them, I mean making really vile threats, physical threats, not only against individuals, but against their families, against their children, against their spouses. The latest episode of this that we saw was when regular, normal, honest judges were pointing out that various Trump executive orders were flagrantly unconstitutional, obviously plain as day unconstitutional and illegal. They would then get bombarded with really dangerous physical threats that required the Marshal Service, for instance, to give 24/7 protection to them until things settle down again. And one of those was that pizza boxes started being delivered at a lot of judges' families' houses. And the pizzas were delivered to a name, not the judge's name, not the judge's family's name, to their address, but to a different name. The name that was on the pizza boxes was a name that judges know, because it was the name of the child of a colleague federal judge who was murdered in his doorway when the child opened the door to somebody who had come to attack the judge. So judges know that story. They know the name of their colleague's son who was killed. And when they start getting pizzas with that murdered son's name on it delivered to their house, that's the kind of threat that Republicans have to deal with, as well as the financial threats and the political threats from Trump's thug operation. So with that, I got 10 minutes to get over to the vote, and it's about 9 minutes away. So I will thank everybody for joining. I look forward to continuing these discussions. Let's keep fighting. Things are starting at last to turn our way as Trump's numbers collapse and as Republicans have to head home for August to their public opinion bath from a public that is not seeing costs come down, but is instead seeing chaos and corruption. Thank you very much.